and welcome back to Storytime. As always, I am Sunny, and we're starting a new book today, but it is not one big mystery all on its own. It actually contains 14 short stories, all of them Hercule Poirot cases, and it's called Poirot Investigates, and I'm thinking there are 14 in total, so we could either do 5 streams of 3 stories, well, the last one being 2 stories, so that would be a short stream, or we could do 2 streams of 3 stories and 2 streams of 4 stories, so those last 2 would run a little extra. And I figured that would give us a good amount of time left over in November to do all of the Charles Dickens Christmas stuff. I'm not really sure what all of the stories are, but there are several Charles Dickens Christmas stories. Of course, the Christmas Carol, which everybody knows, or almost everybody knows. And then I think there's one called The Christmas Ghost, and then the one that I'm really excited about is one called The Haunted House. And that one, as I understand it, and I haven't read it before, but this is as I understand, was that this is a story that Charles Dickens sort of created the skeleton of. Like, he fleshed out the plan of it, and then got some of his author friends to write it with him. And so, sort of, I guess you could say the pizza crust storyline is a man invites a bunch of friends to his house around Christmas and asks them to observe the place because he has heard that it's haunted. And then each chapter of, the guests, each guest's experiences in the haunted house is written by a different author. So I know that Wilkie Collins is one of them, and she writes sort of like psychological horror, mystery, suspense type of things. So I'm really interested to see how she portrays the haunted house element with Dickens. So that's one of the main Christmas things that I'm looking forward to, storytime-wise. But anyways, let's go ahead and get started. We'll be reading 3 stories today, and we might run a tiny bit over, but that's just fine with me. That's fine with you. Story 1, The Adventure of the Western Star. I was standing at the window of Poirot's rooms, looking out idly on the street below. "That's queer," I ejaculated suddenly beneath my breath. "What is, mon ami?" asked Poirot placidly from the depths of his comfortable chair. "Deduce, Poirot, from the following facts. Here is a young lady, richly dressed, fashionable hat, magnificent furs. She is coming along slowly, looking up at the houses as she goes. Unknown to her, she is being shadowed by 3 men and a middle-aged woman. They have just been joined by an errand boy who points after the girl, gesticulating as he does so. What drama is this being played? Is the girl a crook, and are the shadows detectives preparing to arrest her? Or are they the scoundrels, and are they plotting to attack an innocent victim? What does the great detective say? The great detective, mon ami, chooses, as ever, the simplest course. He rises to see for himself, and my friend joined me at the window. In a minute, he gave vent to an amused chuckle. As usual, your facts are tinged with your incurable romanticism. This is Miss Mary Marvel, the film star. She is being followed by a bevy of admirers who have recognized her, and, en passant, my dear Hastings, she is quite aware of the fact." I laughed. "So all is explained, but you get no marks for that, Poirot. It was a mere matter of recognition." "Verite. And how many times have you seen Mary Marvel on the screen, mon cher?" I thought. "About a dozen times, perhaps." "And I?" once. Yet I recognized her and you did not. She looks so different, I replied rather feebly. Ah, sacre, cried Poirot. Is it that you expect her to promenade herself in the streets of London in a cowboy hat, or with bare feet and a bunch of curls, or as an Irish colleen? Always with you it is the non-essentials. Remember the case of the dancer Valérie St. Clair? I shrugged my shoulders, slightly annoyed. But console yourself, mon ami, said Poirot, calming down. All cannot be as Hercule Poirot. I know it well. You really have the best opinion of yourself or of anyone I ever knew, I cried, divided between amusement and annoyance. What will you? When one is unique, one knows it, and others share that opinion, even if I mistake it not. Miss Mary Marvel. What? Without doubt, she is coming here. How did you make that out? Very simple. This street, it is not aristocratic, mon ami. In it there is no fashionable doctor, no fashionable dentist. Still less is there a fashionable milliner. And there is a fashionable detective. Oui, my friend, it is true. I am become the mode, the dernier cri. One always says to another, Comment? You have lost your gold pencil case. You must go to the little Belgian. He is too marvelous. Everyone goes, Hooray! And they arrive in flocks, mon ami, with with problems of the most foolish. A bell rang below. What did I tell you? That is Miss Marvel. As usual, Poirot was right. After a short interval, the American film star was ushered in, and we rose to our feet. Mary Marvel was undoubtedly one of the most popular actresses on the stage. She had only lately arrived in England in company with her husband, Gregory B. Rolfe, also a film actor. Their marriage had taken place about a year ago in the States, and this was their first visit to England. They had been given a great reception. Everyone was prepared to go mad over Mary Marvel, her wonderful clothes, her furs, her jewels, above all one jewel, the great diamond, which had been nicknamed, to match its owner, the Western Star. Much, true and untrue, had been written about this famous stone, which was reported to be insured for the enormous sum of £50,000. All these details passed rapidly through my mind as I joined with Poirot in greeting our fair client. Miss Marvel was small and slender, very fair and girlish-looking, with the wide, innocent blue eyes of a child. Poirot drew forward a chair for her, and she commenced talking at once. You'll probably think me very foolish, Monsieur Poirot. Sorry. But Lord Cronshaw was telling me last night how wonderfully you cleared up the mystery of his nephew's death, and I felt that I just must have your advice. I dare say it's only a silly hoax. Gregory says so, but it's just worrying me to death. She paused for breath. Poirot beamed encouragement. Proceed, madame. You comprehend I am still in the dark. It's these letters. Miss Marvel unclasped her handbag and drew out 3 envelopes, which she handed to Poirot. The latter scrutinized them closely. Cheap paper, name and address carefully printed. Let us see the inside. He drew out the enclosure. I had joined him and was leaning over his shoulder. The writing consisted of a single sentence, carefully printed like the envelope. It ran as follows. The great diamond, which is the left eye of the god, must return whence it came. The second letter was couched in precisely the same terms, but the third was more explicit. You have been warned. You have not obeyed. Now the diamond will be taken from you. At the full of the moon, the 2 diamonds, which are the left and right eye of the god, shall return. So it is written. "The first letter I treated as a joke," exclaimed Miss Marple. "When I got the second, I began to wonder. The third one came yesterday, and it seemed to me that, after all, the matter might be more serious than I had imagined." "I see they did not come by post, these letters." "No, they were left by hand, by a Chinaman. That is what frightens me." "Why?" "Because it was from a chink in San Francisco that Gregory brought the stone 3 years ago." "Apologies. I did not see that coming, otherwise I would have changed the wording. As always, I'm putting up the disclaimer." All right, there we go. I will try to adjust in the future. "No, they were left by hand. That is what frightens me." "Why?" "Because it was from a merchant in San Francisco that Gregory bought the 3 stones years ago." "I see, madam, that you believe the diamond referred to be the Western Star," finished Miss Marple. "That's so. At the time, Gregory remembered that there was some story attached to the stone by the merchant, but the merchant wasn't handing out any information. Gregory says he seemed just scared to death and in a mortal hurry to get rid of the thing. He only asked about a tenth of its value. It was Greg's wedding present to me." Poirot nodded thoughtfully. "The story seems of an utmost unbelievable romanticism, and yet, who knows? I pray you, Hastings, hand me my little almanac." I complied. "Voyons," said Poirot, turning the leaves. "When is the date on the full moon?" "February next. That is in 3 days' time." "Eh bien, madame, you seek my advice, I give it to you. This belle histoire may be a hoax, but it may not. Therefore, I counsel you to place the diamond in my keeping until after Friday next. Then we can take what steps we please." A slight cloud passed over the actress's face, and she replied constrainedly, "I'm afraid that's impossible." "You have it with you, yeah?" Poirot was watching her narrowly. The girl hesitated a moment, then slipped her hand into the bosom of her gown, drawing out a long, thin chain. She leaned forward and unclosing her hand. In the palm, a stone of white fire, exquisitely set in platinum, lay and winked at us solemnly. Poirot drew in his breath with a long hiss. "Épatant," he murmured. "You permit, madame?" He took the jewel in his own hand and scrutinized it keenly, then restored it to her with a little bow. "A magnificent stone, without a flaw." "Ah, sans tonnerre. And you carry it about with you, comme ça?" No. I'm very careful, really, Monsieur Poirot. As a rule, it's locked up in my jewel case and left in the hotel safe deposit. We're staying at the Magnificent, you know. And I just brought it along today for you to see. You will leave it with me, n'est-ce pas? You will be advised by Papa Poirot. Well, you see, it's this way, Monsieur Poirot. On Friday, we're going down to Yardley Chase to spend a few days with Lord and Lady Yardley. Her words awoke a vague echo of remembrance in my mind. Some gossip, what was it now? A few years ago, Lord and Lady Yardley had paid a visit to the States. Rumor had it that his lordship had rather gone the pace out there with the assistance of some lady friends, but surely there was something more gossip which coupled Lady Yardley's name with that of a movie star in California. Why, it came to me in a flash. Of course, it was none other than Gregory B. Rolfe. I'll let you in on a little secret, Monsieur Poirot, Miss Marple was continuing. We've got a deal on with Lord Yardley. There's some chance of our arriving to film a play down there in his ancestral pile. At Yardley Chase? I cried, interested. It's one of the show places of England. Miss Marple nodded. I guess it's the real old feudal stuff, all right, but He wants a pretty stiff price, and of course, I don't know yet whether the deal will go through, but Greg and I always like to combine business with pleasure. But I command pardon if I am dense, madame. Surely it is possible to visit. Sorry. But I demand pardon if I am dense, madame. Surely it is possible to visit Yardley Chase without taking the diamond with you. A shrewd, hard look came into Miss Marvle's eyes, which belied their childlike appearance. She looked suddenly a good deal older. I want to wear it down there. Surely, I said suddenly, there are some very famous jewels in the Yardley collection, large diamond amongst them? That's so, said Miss Marvle briefly. I heard Poirot murmur beneath his breath, Ah, c'est comme ça. Then he said aloud with his usual uncanny luck in hitting the bullseye. He dignifies it by the name of psychology. Then you are without doubt already acquainted with Lady Yardley, or perhaps your husband is. Gregory knew her when she was out west 3 years ago, and Miss Marvle. She hesitated a moment, said Miss Marvle. She hesitated a moment, and then suddenly added abruptly, Do either of you ever see society gossip? We both pleaded guilty, rather shamefacedly. I ask because in this week's numbers there was an article on famous jewels, and it's really very curious. She broke off. I rose, went to the table at the other side of the room, and returned with the paper in question in my hand. She took it from me, found the article, and began to read aloud. Amongst other famous stones may be included the Star of the East, a diamond in the possession of the Yardley family. An ancestor of the present Lord Yardley brought it back with him from China, and a romantic story is said to attach to it. According to this, the stone was once the right eye of a temple god. Another diamond, exactly similar in form and size, formed the left eye, and the story goes that this jewel, too, would in course of time be stolen. One eye shall go west, the other east, till they shall meet once more. Then in triumph shall they return to the god. It is a curious coincidence that there is at the present time a stone corresponding closely in description with this one, and known as the Star of the West, or the Western Star. It is the property of the celebrated film star Miss Mary Marvle. A comparison of the two stones would be interesting. She stopped. "Épatant," murmured Poirot, "without doubt a romance of the first water." He turned to Miss Mary Marvle. "And you are not afraid, madame? You have no superstitious terrors? You do not fear to introduce these two Siamese twins to each other, lest a person from China should appear and, hey presto, whisk them both back to China?" His tone was mocking, but I fancied that an undercurrent of seriousness lay beneath it. "I don't believe that Lady Yardley's diamond is anything like as good as mine," said Miss Marvle. "Anyway, I'm going to see." What more Poirot would have said, I do not know, for at that moment the door flew open and a splendid-looking man strode into the room. From his crisply curling black hair to the tips of his patent leather boots, he was a hero fit for romance. "I said I'd call round for you, Mary," said Gregory Rolfe, "and here I am. Well, what does Monsieur Poirot say to our little problem? Just one big hoax, same as I do?" Poirot smiled up at the big actor. They made a ridiculous contrast. "Hoax or no hoax, Monsieur Rolfe," he said dryly, "I have advised Madame your wife not to take the jewel with her to Yardley Chase on Friday." "I'm with you there, sir. I've already said so to Mary. But there, she's a woman through and through, and I guess she can't bear to think of another woman outshining her in the jewel line." "What nonsense, Gregory," said Miss Mary sharply, but she flushed angrily. Poirot shrugged his shoulders. Madame, I have advised. I can do no more. C'est fini. Oh, my goodness, I forgot to take the singing maestro out. Sorry about that. That was long overdue. Yeah, there we go. Poirot shrugged his shoulders. Madame, I have advised. I can do no more. C'est fini. He bowed them both to the door. Ah la la, he observed, returning. Histoire de femme. The good husband, he hit the nail. Tout de même. But he was not tactful. Assuredly not. I imparted to him my vague remembrances, and he nodded vigorously. So I thought, all the same, there is something curious underneath all this. With your permission, Oh, that's supposed to be Poirot. With your permission, mon ami, I will take the air. Await my return. I beg of you, I shall not be long. I was half asleep in my chair when the landlady tapped on the door and put her head in. It's another lady to see Monsieur Poirot, sir. I've told her he was out, but she says as how she'll wait, seeing as she's come up from the country. Oh, show her in here, Mrs. Murchison. Perhaps I can do something for her. In another moment the lady had been ushered in. My heart gave a leap as I recognized her. Lady Yardley's portrait had figured too often in the society papers to allow her to remain unknown. Do sit down, Lady Yardley, I said, drawing forward a chair. My friend Poirot is out, but I know for a fact that he'll be back very shortly. She thanked me and sat down. A very different type, this, from Miss Mary Marvel. Tall, dark, with flashing eyes, and a pale, proud face, yet something wistful in the curves of the mouth. I felt a desire to rise to the occasion. Why not? In Poirot's presence I have frequently felt a difficulty. I do not appear at my best. And yet there is no doubt that I, too, possess the deductive sense in a marked degree. I leant forward on a sudden impulse. Lady Yardley, I said, I know why you have come here. You have received blackmailing letters about the diamond. There was no doubt as to my bolt having shot home. She stared at me open-mouthed, all color banished from her cheeks. You know? She gasped. How? I smiled. By a perfectly logical process. If Miss Marvel has had warning letters... Miss Marvel? She's been here? She has just left. As I was saying, if she, as the holder of one of the twin diamonds, has received a mysterious series of warnings, you, as the holder of the other stone, must necessarily have done the same. You see how simple it is? I'm right, then. You have received these strange communications also. For a moment she hesitated, as though in doubt whether to trust me or not. Then she bowed her head in assent with a little smile. That is so, she acknowledged. Were yours too left by, a man from China? No, they came by post. But tell me, has Miss Marvel undergone the same experience, then? I recounted to her the events of the morning. She listened attentively. It all fits in. My letters are the duplicate of hers. It is true that they have come by post, but there is a curious perfume impregnating them. Something in the nature of joss stick. That at once suggested the East to me. What does it all mean? I shook my head. That is what we must find out. You have the letters with you? We might learn something from the postmarks. Unfortunately, I destroyed them. You understand, at the time I regarded it as some foolish joke. Can it be true that some Chinese gang are really trying to recover the diamonds? It seems too incredible. We went over the facts again and again, but she could go no further towards the elucidation of the mystery. At last Lady Yardley rose. I really don't think I need wait for Monsieur Poirot. You can tell him all this, can't you? Thank you so much, Mr. She hesitated, her hand outstretched. Captain Hastings. Of course! How stupid of me. You're a friend of the Cavendishes, aren't you? It was Mary Cavendish who sent me to Monsieur Poirot. When my friend returned, I enjoyed telling him the tale of what had occurred during his absence. He cross-questioned me rather sharply over the details of our conversation, and I could read between the lines that he was not best pleased to have been absent. I also fancied that the dear old fellow was just the least inclined to be jealous. It had become rather a pose with him to consistently belittle my abilities, and I think he was chagrined at finding no loophole for criticism. I was secretly rather pleased with myself, though I tried to conceal the fact for fear of irritating him. In spite of his idiosyncrasies, I was deeply attached to my quaint little friend. Bien, he said at length, with a curious look on his face. The plot develops. Pass me, I pray, the peerage on the top shelf there. He turned the leaves. Ah, here we are. Yardley, 10th Vicomte, served South African War. Tout ça n'a pas l'importance. 1907. Honorable Maud Stopperton, 4th daughter of 3rd Baron Cotterill, has issued 2 daughters born 1908-1910. Clubs, residences. Voila, that does not tell us much, but tomorrow morning we will see this my lord. What? Yes, I telephoned to him. I thought you would wash your hands of the case. I'm not acting for Miss Marvel, since she refuses to be guided by my advice. What I do now is for my own satisfaction. Satisfaction of Hercule Poirot. Decidedly, I must have a finger in this pie. And you calmly wire Lord Yardley to dash up to town just to suit your convenience. You won't be pleased. Au contraire, if I preserve for him his family diamond, he ought to be very grateful. Then you really think there is any chance of it being stolen? I asked eagerly. Almost a certainty, replied Poirot placidly. Everything points that way. But how? Poirot stopped my eager question with an airy gesture of the hand. Not now, I pray you. Let us not confuse the mind. And observe that peerage, how you have replaced him. See you not that the tallest books go in the top shelf, the next tallest in the row beneath, and so on. Thus we have order, method, which, as I have often told you, exactly, I said hastily, and put the offending volume in its proper place. I don't know how he thinks he can find books just by size. Now, by subject, maybe, but, yeah. Oh, hey, Wholesome, how are you doing? Good to see you. How's your, here, I'll put my strap. How's your day been going? I was glad I got to catch a little bit of your stream this weekend, even though I couldn't really stay longer than I did yesterday. But it was good to see you and all your folks. How was the rest of your stream? Oh, thank you. What are you going to be playing? And are you going to be streaming it? Okay, nice. I like just playing a game for myself every now and again, kind of like refreshes the enjoyment of games, because I mean, I like streaming games. It is a lot of fun. It's it's fun to have the companionship of other people who enjoy gaming or watching gaming, but sometimes it's nice to just do something for yourself. Yeah. Oh, and I've already started working on... Yeah, same. I've already started working on the setup for the wrap-along. I don't know when it's going to be yet. I don't know when my sister and I are going to drop the presents off to the parents, but this is what I have so far. Of course, obviously, the background is going to change, but we've got the little slideshow here, and I figured I'd use the webcam frame. Actually, let me... Yeah, that's good. Oh, that was accidental. Still kind of works, though. Anyways, that's the setup I'm going to be using for the wrap-along. And, even if just like one or two people come, it'll still be fun, I think. Gotta work now on a playlist for royalty-free Christmas music. Yeah. Anyways, I'm going to go ahead and continue. So we will hide Maestro. We are at Section 2 in the Western Star. There we go. The Western Star, Part 2. Lord Yardley turned out to be a cheery, loud-voiced sportsman with a rather red face, but with a good-humored bonhomie about him that was distinctly attractive and made up for any lack of mentality. Extraordinary business, this, Monsieur Poirot. Can't make head or tail of it. Seems my wife's been getting odd kind of letters, and that Miss Marvel's had 'em too. What does it all mean? Poirot handed him the copy of Society Gossip. First, milord, I would ask you if these facts are substantially correct. The peer took it, his face darkened with anger as he read. Damned nonsense, he sputtered. There's never been any romantic story attached to the diamond. It came from India originally, I believe. I never heard of all these Chinese god stuff. Still, the stone is known as the Star of the East. Well, what if it is? He demanded wrathfully. Poirot smiled a little, but made no direct reply. What I would like to ask you to do, milord, is to place yourself in my hands. If you do so unreservedly, I have great hopes of averting the catastrophe. Then you think there's actually something in these wildcat tales? Will you do as I ask you? Of course I will, but bien. Then permit that I ask you a few questions. This affair of Yardley Chase, is it, as you say, all fixed up between you and Monsieur Rolfe? Oh, he told you about it, did he? No, there's nothing settled. He hesitated, the brick-red color of his face deepening. Might as well get the thing straight. I've made rather an ass of myself in many ways, Monsieur Poirot, and I'm head over ears in debt. But I want to pull up. I'm fond of the kids, and I want to straighten things up and be able to live on at the old place. Gregory Rolfe is offering me big money, enough to set me on my feet again. I don't want to do it. I hate the thought of all that crowd play acting round the chase, but I may have to, unless... He broke off. Poirot eyed him keenly. You have then another string to your bow? Permit that I make a guess. It is to sell the Star of the East? Lord Yardley nodded. That's it. It's been in the family for some generations, but it's not essential. Still, it's not the easiest thing in the world to find a purchaser. Hofburg, the Hatton Garden man, is on the lookout for a likely customer, but he'll have to find one soon, or it's a washout. One more question, permettez? Lady Yardley, which plan does she approve? Oh, she's bitterly opposed to my selling the jewel. You know what women are. She's all for this film stunt. I comprehend, said Poirot. He remained a moment or so in thought, then rose briskly to his feet. You return to Yardley Chase at once? Bien. Say no word to anyone. Not to anyone, mind. but expect us there this evening. We will arrive shortly after 5. All right, but I don't see ça n'a pas d'importance, said Poirot kindly. You will that I preserve for you your diamond, n'est-ce pas? Yes, but then do as I say. A sadly bewildered nobleman left the room. Part 3. It was 5:30 when we arrived at Yardley Chase and followed the dignified butler to the old panelled hall with its fire of blazing logs. A pretty picture met our eyes. Lady Yardley and her 2 children, the mother's proud dark head bent down over the 2 fair ones. Lord Yardley stood near, smiling down on them. Monsieur Poirot and Captain Hastings, announced the butler. Lady Yardley looked up with a start, for her husband came forward uncertainly, his eyes seeking instruction from Poirot. The little man was equal to the occasion. All my excuses. It is that I investigate still this affair of Miss Marvel's. She comes to you on Friday, does she not? I make a little tour first to make sure that all is secure. Also, I want you to ask Lady Yardley if she recollected all of the postmarks on the letters she received. Lady Yardley shook her head regretfully. I'm afraid I don't. It's stupid of me, but you see I never dreamt of taking them seriously. You'll stay the night? Said Lord Yardley. My lord, I fear to incommode you. We have left our bags at the inn. That's all right. Lord Yardley had his cue. We'll send down for them. No trouble, I assure you. Poirot permitted himself to be persuaded, and sitting down by Lady Yardley, began to make friends with the children. In a short time they were all romping together and had dragged me into the game. Vous êtes bonne mère, said Poirot with a gallant little bow as the children were removed reluctantly by a stern nurse. Lady Yardley smoothed her ruffled hair. I adore them, she said with a little catch in her voice. And they you with reason. Poirot bowed again. A dressing gong sounded, and we rose to go to our rooms. At that moment the butler emerged with a telegram on a salver, which he handed to Lord Yardley. The latter tore it open with a brief word of apology. As he read it, he stiffened visibly. With an ejaculation, he handed it to his wife. Then he glanced at my friend. Just a moment, Monsieur Poirot. I feel you ought to know about this. It's from Hofburg. He thinks he's found a customer for the diamond, an American sailing for the States tomorrow. They're sending down a chap tonight to vet the stone. By Jove, though, if this goes through. Words failed him. Lady Yardley had turned away. She still held the telegram in her hand. I wish you wouldn't sell it, George, she said in a low voice. It's been in the family so long. She waited as though for a reply, but when none came, her face hardened. She shrugged her shoulders. I must go and dress. I suppose I'd better display the goods. She turned to Poirot with a slight grimace. It's one of the most hideous necklaces that was ever designed. George has always promised to have the stones reset for me, but it's never been done. She left the room. Half an hour later, we 3 were assembled in the great drawing room awaiting the lady. It was already a few minutes past the dinner hour. Suddenly there was a low rustle, and Lady Yardley appeared framed in the doorway, a radiant figure in a long, white, shimmering dress. Round the column of her neck was a rivulet of fire. She stood there with one hand just touching the necklace. Behold the sacrifice, she said gaily. Her ill-humor seemed to have vanished. Wait while I turn the big light on, and you shall feast your eyes on the ugliest necklace in England. The switches were just outside the door. As she stretched out her hand to them, the incredible thing happened. Suddenly, without any warning, every light was extinguished and the door banged, and from the other side of it came a long-drawn, piercing woman's scream. "My God!" cried Lord Yardley. "That was Maud's voice! What has happened?" We rushed blindly for the door, cannoning into each other in the darkness. It was some minutes before we could find it. What a sight met our eyes! Lady Yardley lay senseless on the marble floor, a crimson mark on her white throat where the necklace had been wrenched from her neck. As we bent over her, uncertain for the moment whether she was dead or alive, her eyelids opened. The man from China," she whispered painfully. "The man from China. The side door." Lord Yardley sprang up with an oath. I accompanied him, my heart beating wildly. The man from China again. The side door in question was a small one on the angle of the wall, not more than a dozen yards from the scene of the tragedy. As we reached it, I gave a cry. There, just short of the threshold, lay the glittering necklace, evidently dropped by the thief in the panic of his flight. I swooped joyously down at it. Then I uttered another cry, which Lord Yardley echoed, for in the middle of the necklace was a great gap. The Star of the East was missing. "That settles it," I breathed. These were no ordinary thieves. This one stone was all they wanted. But how did the fellow get in? "Through this door." "But it's always locked." I shook my head. "It's not locked now. See?" I pulled it open as I spoke. As I did so, something fluttered to the ground. I picked it up. It was a piece of silk, and the embroidery was unmistakable. It had been torn from a Chinese man's robe. In his haste, it caught in the door, I explained. "Come, hurry. He cannot have gone far as yet." But in vain we hunted and searched. In the pitch darkness of the night, the thief had found it easy to make his getaway. We returned reluctantly, and Lord Yardley set off one of the footmen post-haste to fetch the police. Sorry, I'm getting a little froggy. Lady Yardley, aptly ministered to by Poirot, who is as good as a woman in these matters, was sufficiently recovered to be able to tell her story. "I was just going to turn on the other light," she said, "when a man sprang out from behind. He tore my necklace from my neck with such force that I fell headlong to the floor. As I fell, I saw him disappearing through the side door. Then I realized by the pigtail and the embroidered robe that he was from China." She stopped with a shudder. The butler reappeared. He spoke in a low voice to Lord Yardley. "A gentleman with Mr. Hofburg's, my lord. From Mr. Hofburg's, my lord. He says you expect him." "Good heavens!" cried the distracted nobleman. "I must see him, I suppose." "No, not here. Mullings in the library." I drew Poirot aside. "Look here, my dear fellow, hadn't we better get back to London?" "You think so, Hastings? Why?" "Well," I coughed delicately, "things have gone very well, have they? I mean, you tell Lord Yardley to place himself in your hands, and all will be well, and then the diamond vanishes from under your very nose." "True," said Poirot, rather crestfallen. "It was not one of my most striking triumphs." This way of describing events almost caused me to smile, but I stuck to my guns. "So, having, pardon the expression, rather, hang on a second, who is speaking? So having, pardon the expression, rather made a mess of things, don't you think it would be more graceful to leave immediately? And the dinner, with the, without doubt, excellent dinner that the chef of Lord Yardley has prepared?" "Oh, what's dinner?" I said impatiently. Poirot held up his hand in horror. Mon Dieu! It is that in this country you treat the affairs gastronomic with a criminal indifference. There is another reason why we should get back to London as soon as possible, I continued. What is that, my friend? The other diamond, I said, lowering my voice. Miss Marvel's. Eh bien, what of it? Don't you see? His unusual obtuseness annoyed me. What had happened to his usually keen wits? They've got one, now they'll go for the other. Tiens, cried Poirot, stepping back a pace and regarding me with admiration. Your brain marches to a marvel, my friend. Figure to yourself that for the moment I had not thought of that. There is plenty of time. The full of the moon, it is not until Friday. I shook my head dubiously. The full of the moon theory left me entirely cold. I had my way with Poirot, however, and we departed immediately, leaving behind us a note of explanation and apology for Lord Yardley. My idea was to go at once to the Magnificent and relate to Miss Marvel what had occurred, but Poirot vetoed the plan and insisted that the morning would be time enough. I gave in rather grudgingly. In the morning, Poirot seemed strangely disinclined to stir out. I began to suspect that, having made a mistake to start with, he was singularly loath to proceed with the case. In answer to my persuasion, he pointed out, with admirable common sense, that as the details of the affair at Yardley Chase were already in the morning papers, the Rolfes would know quite as much as we could tell them. I gave way unwillingly. Events proved my forebodings to be justified. About 2 o'clock, the telephone rang. Poirot answered it. He listened for some moments. Then, with a brief, "Bien, j'y serai," he rang off and turned to me. "What do you think, mon ami?" He looked half ashamed, half excited. "The diamond of Miss Marvel, it has been stolen." "What?" I cried, springing up. "What about the full of the moon now?" Poirot hung his head. "When did this happen?" "This morning, I understand." I shook my head sadly. If only you had listened to me. You see, I was right. "It appears so, mon ami," said Poirot cautiously. "Appearances are deceptive, they say, but it certainly appears so." As we hurried in a taxi to the Magnificent, I puzzled out the true inwardness of the scheme. That full of the moon idea was clever. The whole point of it was to get us to concentrate on the Friday, and so be off our guard beforehand. It is a pity you did not realize that. "Ma foi," said Poirot airily, his nonchalance quite restored after his brief eclipse. "One cannot think of everything." I felt sorry for him. He did so hate failure of any kind. "Cheer up," I said consolingly. "Better luck next time." At the Magnificent, we were ushered at once into the manager's office. Gregory Rolfe was there with 2 men from Scotland Yard. A pale-faced clerk sat opposite them. Rolfe nodded to us as we entered. "We're getting to the bottom of it," he said. "But it's almost unbelievable. How the guy had the nerve, I can't think." A very few minutes sufficed to give us the facts. Mr. Rolfe had gone out of the hotel at 11:15. At 11:30, a gentleman, so like him in appearance as to pass muster, entered the hotel and demanded the jewel case from the safe deposit. He duly signed the receipt, remarking carelessly as he did so, "Looks a bit different from my ordinary one, but I hurt my hand getting out of the taxi." The clerk merely smiled and remarked that he saw very little difference. Rolfe laughed and said, "Well, don't run me in as a crook this time, anyway. I've been getting threatening letters from a person from China, and the worst of it is I look rather like I'm from China myself. It's something about the eyes." I looked at him, said the clerk who was telling us this, and I saw at once what he meant. The eyes slanted up in the corners, like an Oriental's. I've never noticed it before. "Darn it all, man!" roared Gregory Rolfe, leaning forward. Do you notice it now?" The man looked up at him and started. "No, sir," he said. "I can't say I do." And indeed there was nothing even remotely oriental about the frank brown eyes that looked into ours. The Scotland Yard man grunted, "Bold customer," thought the eyes might be noticed, and took the bull by the horns to disarm suspicion. "He must have watched you out of the hotel, sir, and nipped in as soon as you were well away." "What about the tool case?" I asked. "It was found in the corner of the hotel. Only one thing had been taken, the Western Star." We stared at each other. The whole thing was so bizarre, so unreal. Poirot hopped briskly to his feet. "I have not been of much use, I fear," he said regretfully. "Is it permitted to see Madame?" "I guess she'd prostrate with the shock," exclaimed Rolfe. "Then perhaps I might have a few words alone with you, monsieur." "Certainly." In about 5 minutes Poirot reappeared. "Now, my friend," he said gaily, "to a post office. I have to send a telegram." "Who to?" "Lord Yardley." He discounted further inquiries by slipping his arm through mine. Come, mon ami. I know all that you feel about this terrible business. I have not distinguished myself. You, in my place, might have distinguished yourself. Bien. All is admitted. Let us forget it and have lunch." It was about 4 o'clock when we entered Poirot's rooms. A figure rose from a chair by the window. It was Lord Yardley. He looked haggard and distraught. "I got your wire and came up at once. Look here, I've been round to Hofburg, and they know nothing about that man of theirs last night, or the wire either. Do you think that—" Poirot held up his hand. "My excuses. I sent that wire, and hired the gentleman in question." "You? But why? What?" The nobleman sputtered impotently. "My little idea was to bring things to a head," exclaimed Poirot placidly. "Bring things to a head? My God!" cried Lord Yardley. "And the ruse succeeded," said Poirot cheerfully. "Therefore, my lord, I have much pleasure in returning you this." With a dramatic gesture, he produced a glittering object. It was a great diamond. "The Star of the East!" gasped Lord Yardley. "But I don't understand." "No?" said Poirot. "It makes no sense. Believe me, it was necessary for the diamond to be stolen. I promised you that it would be preserved to you, and I have kept my word. You must permit me to keep my little secret. Convey, I beg of you, the assurance of my deepest respect to Lady Yardley, and tell her how pleased I am to be able to restore her jewel to her. What beau temps, is it not? A good day, my lord?" And smiling and talking, the amazing little man conducted the bewildered nobleman to the door. He returned gently, rubbing his hands. "Poirot," I said, "am I quite demented?" "No, mon ami, but you are, as always, in a mental fog." "How did you get the diamond?" "From Mr. Rolfe." "Rolfe?" "Mais oui. The warning letters, the man from China, the article in Secret Gossip, all sprang from the ingenious brain of Mr. Rolfe. The two diamonds, supposed to be so miraculously alike, bah! They did not exist. There was only one diamond, my friend. Originally in the Yardley collection for 3 years, it has been in the possession of Mr. Rolfe. He stole it this morning with the assistance of a touch of grease paint at the corner of each eye. I must see him on the film. He is indeed an artist, celui-là." "But why should he steal his own diamond?" I asked, puzzled. "For many reasons. To begin with, Lady Yardley was getting restive." "Lady Yardley?" "You comprehend she was left much alone in California. Her husband was amusing himself elsewhere. Mr. Rolfe was handsome. He had an air about him of romance. But au fond, he is very business-like, ce monsieur. He made love to Lady Yardley, and then he blackmailed her. I taxed the lady with the truth the other night, and she admitted it. She swore that she had only been indiscreet, and I believe her. But undoubtedly Rolf had letters of hers that could be twisted to bear a different interpretation. Terrified by the threat of a divorce and the prospect of being separated from her children, she agreed to all he wished. She had no money of her own, and she was forced to permit him to substitute a paste replica for the real one. The coincidence of the date of the appearance of the Western Star struck me at once. All goes well, Lord Yardley prepares to arrange himself, to settle down, and then comes the menace of the possible sale of the diamond. The substitution will be discovered. Without doubt, she writes off frantically to Gregory Rolfe, who has just arrived in England. He soothes her by promising to arrange all, and prepares for a double robbery. In this way he will quiet the lady, who might conceivably tell all to her husband, an affair which would not suit our blackmailer at all, and he will have £50,000 insurance money. Ha, you have forgotten that. And he will still have the diamond. At this point I put my fingers in the pie. The arrival of a diamond expert is announced. Lady Yardley, as I felt sure she would, immediately arranges a robbery. And does it very well too. But Hercule Poirot, he sees nothing but facts. What happens in actuality? The lady switches off the light, bangs the door, throws the necklace down the passage, and screams. She has already wrenched out the diamond with pliers upstairs. But we saw the necklace round her neck, I objected. I demand pardon, my friend. Her hand concealed the part of it where the gap would have shown. To place a piece of silk in the door beforehand is child's play. Of course, as soon as Rolf read of the robbery, he arranged his own little comedy. And very well he played it. Oh, hey, Puma, good to see you. We're getting near the end of the first story, and then I'll stop and chat. Where is it? Oh, there. What did you say to him? I asked with lively curiosity. I said to him that Lady Yardley had told her husband all, that I was empowered to recover the jewel, and that if it were not immediately handed over, proceedings would be taken. Also a few more little lies which occurred to me. He was as wax in my hand. I pondered the matter. It seems a little unfair to Miss Marvel. She has lost her diamond through no fault of her own. Bah! Said Poirot brutally. She has a magnificent advertisement. That is all she cares for, that one. Now the other, she is different. Bonne mère, très femme. Yes, I said doubtfully, hardly sharing Poirot's views on femininity. I suppose it was Rolf who sent her the duplicate letters. Pas du tout, said Poirot briskly. She came by the advice of Mary Cavendish to seek my aid in her dilemma. Mary Cavendish, by the way, was in The Mysterious Affair at Styles. Then she heard that Mary Marvel, whom she knew to be her enemy, had been there, and she changed her mind, jumping at the pretext that you, my friend, offended her. A very few questions suffice to say that you told her of the letters, not she, you. She jumped at the chance your words offered. I don't believe it, I cried, stung. Si, mon ami, it is a pity that you study not the psychology. She told you that the letters were destroyed? La, never does a woman destroy a letter if she can avoid it, not even if it would be more prudent to do so. It's all very well, I said, my anger rising, but you made a perfect fool of me from beginning to end. No, it's all very well to try and explain it away afterwards. There really is a limit. But you were so enjoying yourself, my friend, I had not the heart to shatter your illusions. It's not good. You've gone a bit too far this time. Mon Dieu, but how you enrage yourself for nothing, mon ami. I'm fed up, I went out, banging the door. Poirot had made an absolute laughingstock of me. I decided that he needed a sharp lesson. I would let some time elapse before I forgave him. He had encouraged me to make a perfect fool of myself. All right, taking a little break. How are you doing, Puma? Are you feeling better? I know that you had not been feeling very well for a while. Oh, good. I'm glad to hear it. That's right. My sister and I are planning on trying the salad dressing recipe soon. We just have to copy down all the ingredients because it is coming up on ginger tea ginger tea season. So, we'll be getting ginger anyways. I love ginger. Yeah, we're really looking forward to it because we love a good, I'm imagining that it probably tastes a lot like the dressing that they use at our local Japanese restaurant. Though we're planning on using sesame oil instead of peanut oil because I can't have peanuts and my sister doesn't like them. But yeah, we'll give it a try and we'll let you know what it's like with the sesame oil. Really interested in it. All right. So I'm going to get back to it. We're definitely going to be running over today. Yeah. Oh, these by the way, I don't know if you had seen the announcement or anything, but these are all short story cases of Hercule Poirot in the book Poirot Investigates. So, yeah. We're going to do 3 today. Story 2, The Tragedy at Marsdon Manor. I had been called away from town for a few days, and on my return found Poirot in the act of strapping up his small valise. "À la bonne heure, Hastings. I feared you would not have returned in time to accompany me." "You were called away on a case, then?" "Yes, though I am bound to admit that, on the face of it, the affair does not seem promising. The Northern Union Insurance Company have asked me to investigate the death of a Mr. Maltravers, who a few weeks ago insured his life with them for the large sum of £50,000. "Yes," I said, much interested. "There was, of course, the usual suicide clause in the policy. In the event of his committing suicide within a year, the premiums would be forfeited. Mr. Maltravers was duly examined by the company's own doctor, and although he was a man slightly past the prime of life, was passing as being in quite sound health. However, on Wednesday last, the day before yesterday, the body of Mr. Maltravers was found in the grounds of his house in Essex, Marsdon Manors, and the cause of his death is described as some kind of internal hemorrhage. That in itself would be nothing remarkable, but sinister rumors as to Mr. Maltravers' financial positions have been in the air of late, and the Northern Union have ascertained beyond any possible doubt that the deceased gentleman stood upon the verge of bankruptcy. Now that alters matters considerably. Maltravers had a beautiful young wife, and it is suggested that he got altogether all the ready money he could for the purpose of paying the premiums on life insurance for his wife's benefit, and then committed suicide. Hey, John, good to see you. Haven't seen you in a little while. Hope you're doing all right. I'll chat in a bit. Let's see. Such a thing is not uncommon. In any case, my friend Alfred Wright, who is a director of the Northern Union, has asked me to investigate the facts of the case, but, as I told him, I am not very hopeful of success. If the cause of the death had been heart failure, I should have been more sanguine. Heart failure may always be translated as the inability of the local GP to discover what his patient really did die of, but a hemorrhage seems fairly definite. Still, we can make some necessary inquiries. 5 minutes to pack your bag, Hastings, and we will take a taxi to Liverpool Street. About an hour later, we alighted from a Great Eastern train at the little station of Marsdon Leigh. Inquiries at the station yielded the information that Marsdon Manor was about a mile distant. Poirot decided to walk, and we betook ourselves along the main street. "What is your plan for campaign?" I asked. "First I will call upon the doctor. I have ascertained that there is only one doctor in Marsdon Leigh, Dr. Ralph Bernard. Ah, here we are at his house." The house in question was a kind of superior cottage, standing back a little from the road. A brass plate on the gate bore the doctor's name. We passed up the path and rang the bell. We proved to be fortunate in our call. It was the doctor's consulting hour, and for the moment there were no patients waiting for him. Dr. Bernard was an elderly man, high-shouldered and stooping, with a pleasant vagueness of manner. By the way, in the early 1900s, I believe, they were still doing, doctors who, instead of having an office and having the patients come to them, they would be sent for and make house calls. So that, it was a very common thing. Yes, we finished that paragraph. Poirot introduced himself and explained the purpose of our visit, adding that insurance companies were bound to investigate fully in a case of this kind. Of course, said Dr. Bernard vaguely. "I suppose as he was such a rich man, his life was insured for a big sum? You consider him a rich man, Doctor?" The doctor looked rather surprised. "Was he not? He kept 2 cars, and Marsden Manors is a pretty big place to keep up, although I believe he bought it very cheap." "I understand that he had considerable losses of late," said Poirot, watching the doctor narrowly. The latter, however, merely shook his head sadly. "That's so? Indeed. It is fortunate for his wife, then, that there is this life insurance. A very beautiful and charming young creature, but terribly unstrung by this sad catastrophe. A mass of nerves, poor thing. I have tried to spare her all I can, but of course the shock was bound to be considerable." "You had been attending Mr. Maltravers recently?" "My dear sir, I never attended him." "What?" I understand Mr. Maltravers was a Christian Scientist, or something of that kind." "But you examined the body?" "Certainly, I was fetched by one of the under gardeners." "And the cause of death was clear?" "Absolutely. There's blood on the lips, but most of the bleeding must have been internal." "Was he still lying where he had been found?" "Yes, the body had not been touched. He was lying at the edge of a small plantation. He had evidently been out shooting rooks, and some rook rifle lay beside him. The hemorrhage must have occurred quite suddenly. Gastric ulcer without a doubt." "No question of his having been shot, eh?" "My dear sir!" "I demand pardon," said Poirot humbly. "But if my memory is not at fault, in the case of a recent murder, the doctor first gave a verdict of heart failure, altering it when the local constable pointed out that there was a bullet wound through the head." "We'll not find any bullet wounds on the body of Mr. Maltravers," said Dr. Bernard dryly. "Now, gentlemen, if there is nothing further—" We took the hint. "Good morning, and many thanks to you, Doctor, for so kindly answering our questions. By the way, you saw no need for an autopsy?" "Certainly not." The doctor became quite apoplectic. "The cause of death was clear, and in my profession, we see no good to distress unduly the relatives of a dead patient." And, turning, the doctor slammed the door sharply in our faces. "What do you think of Dr. Bernard, Hastings?" inquired Poirot, as we proceeded on our way to the Manor. "Rather an old ass." Exactly. Your judgments of character are always profound, my friend. I glanced at him uneasily, but he seemed perfectly serious. A twinkle, however, came into his eye as he added slyly, "That is to say that there is no question of a beautiful woman." I looked at him coldly. On our arrival at the manor, the door was opened to us by a middle-aged parlour-maid. Poirot handed her his card and a letter from the insurance company for Mrs. Maltravers. She showed us into a small morning room and retired to tell her mistress. About 10 minutes elapsed, and then the door opened, and a slender figure in widow's weeds stood upon the threshold. "Monsieur Poirot?" she faltered. "Madame!" Poirot sprang gallantly to his feet and hastened toward her. "I cannot tell you how I regret to derange you in this way, but what will you? Les affaires, they know no mercy." Mrs. Maltravers permitted him to lead her to a chair. Her eyes were red with weeping, but the temporary disfigurement could not conceal her extraordinary beauty. She was about 27 or 8, and very fair, with large blue eyes and a pretty pouting mouth. "It is something about my husband's insurance, is it? But must I be bothered now? So soon?" "Courage, my dear madame, courage. You see, your late husband insured his life for rather a large sum, and in such a case the company always has to satisfy itself as to a few details. They have empowered me to act for them. You can rest assured that I will do all in my power to render the matter not too unpleasant for you. Will you recount them to me briefly, the sad events of Wednesday?" "I was changing for tea when my maid came up. One of the gardeners had just run to the house. He had found—" Her voice trailed away. Poirot pressed her hand sympathetically. "I comprehend. Enough. You had seen your husband earlier in the afternoon?" "Not since lunch. I had walked down to the village for some stamps, and I believe he was out pottering round the grounds." "Shooting rooks, eh?" "Yes, he usually took his little rook rifle with him, and I heard 1 or 2 shots in the distance." "Where is this little rook rifle now?" "In the hall, I think." She led the way out of the room and found and handed the little weapon to Poirot, who examined it curiously. "2 shots fired, I see," he observed as he handed it back. "And now, madame, if I may see—" He paused delicately. "The servant shall take you," she murmured, averting her head. The parlour-maid summoned led Poirot upstairs. I remained with the lovely and unfortunate woman. It was hard to know whether to speak or remain silent. I essayed 1 or 2 general reflections, to which she responded absently, and in a very few minutes Poirot rejoined us. "I thank you all for your courtesy, madame. I do not think I need to trouble any further with this matter. By the way, do you know anything of your husband's financial position?" She shook her head. "Nothing whatever. I'm very stupid over business things." "I see. Then you can give us no clue as to why he suddenly decided to insure his life? He had not done so previously, I understand." "Well, we had only been married a little over a year, but as to why he insured his life, it was because he had absolutely made up his mind that he would not live long. He had a strong premonition of his own death. I gather that he had had 1 hemorrhage already, and that he knew that another one would prove fatal. I tried to dispel these gloomy fears of his, but without avail. Alas, he was only too right." Tears in her eyes, she bade us a dignified farewell. Poirot made an uncharacteristic gesture as he walked down the drive together. "Eh bien, that is that. Back to London, my friend. There appears to be no mouse in this mousehole. And yet—" "Yet what?" "A slight discrepancy. That is all." "You noticed it? You did not?" Still, life is full of discrepancies, and assuredly the man cannot have taken his life. There is no poison that would fill his mouth with blood. No. I must resign myself to the fact that all here is clear and above board. But who is this? A tall young man was striding up the drive toward us. He passed us without making any sign, but I noted that he was not ill-looking, with a lean, deeply bronzed face that spoke of a life in tropic clime. A gardener, who was sweeping up leaves, had paused for a moment in task, and Poirot ran quickly up to him. "Tell me, I pray you, who is that gentleman? Do you know him?" "I don't remember his name, sir, though I did hear it. He was staying down here last week for a night. Tuesday it was. Quick, mon ami, let us follow him." We hastened up the drive after the retreating figure. A glimpse of a black-robed figure on the terrace at the side of the house, and our quarry swerved and we after it, so that we were witnesses of the meeting. Mrs. Maltravers almost staggered where she stood, and her face blanched noticeably. "You!" she gasped. "I thought you were on the sea, on your way to East Africa." "I got some news from my lawyers that detained me," explained the young man. "My old uncle in Scotland died unexpectedly and left me some money. Under the circumstances, I thought it better to cancel my passage. Then I saw this bad news in the paper, and I came down to see if there was anything I could do. You'll want someone to look after things for you a bit, perhaps." At that moment they became aware of our presence. Poirot stepped forward, and with many apologies explained that he had left his stick in the hall. Rather reluctantly, it seemed to me, Mrs. Maltravers made the necessary introductions. "Monsieur Poirot, Captain Black." A few minutes' chat ensued, in a course of which Poirot elicited the facts that Captain Jack was putting up at the Anchor Inn. The missing stick not having been discovered, which was not surprising, Poirot uttered more apologies, and we withdrew. We returned to the village at a great pace, and Poirot made a beeline for the Anchor Inn. "Here we establish ourselves until our friend the captain returns," he explained. "You notice that I emphasized the point that we were returning to London by the first train? Possibly you thought I meant it, but no. You observed Mrs. Maltravers' face when she caught sight of this young Black? She was clearly taken aback, and he was very devoted, did you not think so? And he was here on Tuesday night, the day before Mr. Maltravers died. We must investigate the doings of Captain Black Hastings." In about half an hour we espied our quarry approaching the inn. Poirot went out and accosted him, and presently brought him up to the room we had engaged. "I have been telling Captain Black of the mission which brings us here," he explained. "You can understand, Monsieur le Capitaine, that I am anxious to arrive at Mr. Maltravers' state of mind immediately before his death, and that at the same time I do not wish to distress Mrs. Maltravers unduly by asking her painful questions. Now, you were here just before the occurrence, and can give us equally valuable information." "I'll do anything I can to help you, I'm sure," replied the young soldier. "But I'm afraid I didn't notice anything out of the ordinary. You see, although Maltravers was an old friend of my people's, I didn't know him very well myself." "You came down when?" "Tuesday afternoon. I went up to town early Wednesday morning, as my boat sailed from Tilbury about 12 o'clock. But some news I got made me alter my plans, as I dare say you heard me explain to Mrs. Maltravers." "You were returning to East Africa, I understand." "Yes, I've been out there ever since the war. Great country." "Exactly. Now, what was the talk about at dinner on Tuesday night?" "Oh, I don't know, the usual odd topics. Maltravers asked after my people, and then we discussed the questions of German reparations. There we go. And then Mr. Maltravers asked a lot of questions about East Africa, and I told them one or two yarns, and that's about all, I think. Thank you. Poirot was silent for a moment. Then he said gently, "With your permission, I should like to try a little experiment. You have told us all that your conscience self knows. I want to question your subconscious self." Psychoanalysis, what?" said Black with visible alarm. "Oh, no," said Poirot reassuringly. "You see, it is like this. I give you a word, you answer with another, and so on. Any word the first you think of. Shall we begin?" "All right," said Black slowly, but he looked uneasy. "Note down the words, please, Hastings," said Poirot. Then he took from his pocket his big turnip-faced watch and laid it on the table beside him. "We will commence. Day." There was a moment's pause, and then Black replied, "Night." As Poirot receded, his answers came quicker. "Name," said Poirot. "Place." "Bernard Shaw." "Tuesday, dinner." "Journey, ship." "Country, Uganda." "Story, lions." "Rook's rifle, farm." "Shoot, suicide." "Elephant, tusks." "Money, lawyers." "Thank you, Captain Black. Perhaps you could spare me a few minutes in about half an hour's time?" "Certainly." The young soldier looked at him curiously and wiped his brow as he got up. "And now, Hastings," said Poirot, smiling at me as the door closed behind him. "You see it all, do you not?" "I don't know what you mean." "Does that list of words tell you nothing?" I scrutinized it, but was forced to shake my head. "I will assist you. To begin with, Black answered well within the normal time limit, with no pauses, so we can take it that he himself has not guilty knowledge to conceal. Day to night, and place to name are normal associations. I begin work with Bernard, which might have suggested the local doctor, had he come across him at all. Evidently he had not. After our recent conversations, he gave dinner to my Tuesday, but journey and country were answered by ship and Uganda, showing clearly that it was his journey abroad that was important to him, and not the one which brought him down here. Story recalls to him one of the lion stories he told at dinner. I proceeded to rook rifle. He answered with the totally unexpected word, farm. When I say shot, he answered at once suicide. The association seemed clear. A man he knows committed suicide with a rook rifle on a farm somewhere. Remember, too, that his mind is still on the stories he told at dinner, and I think you will agree that I shall not be far from the truth if I recall Captain Black and ask him to repeat the particular suicide story which he told at the farm table on Tuesday evening. Black was straightforward enough over the matter. Yes, I did tell them that story about how I came to think of it. Now that I come to think of it, chap shot himself on a farm out there. Did it with a rook rifle through the roof of the mouth. Bullet lodged in the brain. Doctors were no end puzzled over it. There was nothing to show except a little blood on the lips. But what has it got to do with Mr. Maltravers? You did not know, I see, that he was found with a rook rifle by his side. You mean my story suggested to him? Oh, but that is awful! Do not distress yourself. It would have been one way or another, when I must get on the telephone to London. Poirot had a lengthy conversation over the wire and came back thoughtful. He went off by himself in the afternoon, and it was not until 7 o'clock that he announced that he could put it off no longer, but must break the news to the young widow. My sympathy had already gone out of her My sympathy had already gone out to her unreservedly. To be left penniless and with the knowledge that her husband had killed himself to assure her future was a hard burden for any woman to bear. I cherished secret hope, however, that young Black might prove capable of consoling her after her first grief had passed. He evidently admired her enormously. Our interview with the lady was painful. She refused vehemently to believe the facts that Poirot advanced, and when she was at last convinced, broke down into bitter weeping. An examination of the body turned our suspicions into certainty. Poirot was very sorry for the poor lady, but after all, he was employed by the insurance company, and what could he do? As he was preparing to leave, he said gently to Mrs. Maltravers, "Madame, you of all people should know that there are no dead." "What do you mean?" she faltered, her eyes growing wide. "Have you ever taken part in any spiritualistic seances? You are mediumistic, you know." "I have told you so. But you do not believe in spiritualism, surely?" "Madame, I have seen some strange things. You know what they say in the village, that this house is haunted?" She nodded, and at that moment the parlour-maid announced that dinner was ready. "Won't you just stay and have something to eat?" We accepted gracefully, and I felt that our presence could not but help distract her a little from her own griefs. We had just finished our soup, when there was a scream outside the door and the sound of breaking crockery. We jumped up. The parlour-maid appeared, her hand to her heart. "It was a man, standing in the passage." Poirot rushed out, returning quickly. "There's no one there." "Isn't there, sir?" said the parlour-maid weakly. "Oh, it did give me a start." "But why?" She dropped her voice to a whisper. I thought it was the master. It looked like him." I saw Mrs. Maltravers give a terrified start, and my mind flew to the old superstition that a suicide cannot rest. She thought of it too, I am sure, for a moment later she caught Poirot's arm with a scream. "Didn't you hear that? Those 3 taps on the window." "That's how he always used to tap when he passed round the house." "The ivy," I cried. "It was the ivy against the pane." A sort of terror was gaining on us all. The parlour-maid was obviously unstrung, and when the meal was over, Mrs. Maltravers besought Poirot not to go at once. She was clearly terrified to be left alone. We sat in the little morning room. The wind was getting up, and the moaning round the house in an entire fashion. Twice the door of the room came unlatched, and the door swung slowly open, and each time she clung to me with a terrified gasp. "Ah, but this door, it is bewitched!" cried Poirot angrily at last. He got up and shut it once more, then turned the key in the lock. "I shall lock it so." "Don't do that," she gasped. "If it should come open now." And even as she spoke, the impossible happened. The locked door slowly swung open. I could not see into the passage from where I sat, but she and Poirot were facing it. She gave one long shriek as she turned to him. "You saw him! There in the passage!" she cried. He was staring down at her with a puzzled face, then shook his head. I saw him. My husband. You must have seen him too." "Madame, I saw nothing. You are not well, unstrung." "I'm perfectly well. Oh, God!" Suddenly, without warning, the lights quivered and went out. Out of the darkness came 3 loud raps. I could hear Mrs. Maltravers moaning. And then I saw. The man I had seen on the bed upstairs stood there, facing us, gleaming with a faint ghostly light. There was blood on his lips, and he held his right hand out, pointing. Suddenly, a brilliant light seemed to proceed from it. It passed over Poirot and me and fell on Mrs. Maltravers. I saw a white, terrified face, and something else. "My God, Poirot!" I cried. "Look at her hand! Her right hand, it's all red!" Her own eyes fell on it, and she collapsed in a heap on the floor. "Blood!" she cried hysterically. "Yes, it's blood. I killed him. I did it. He was showing me, and then I put my hand on the trigger and pressed. Save me from him, save me! He's come back! Her voice died away in a gurgle. Lights, said Poirot briskly. The lights went on as if by magic. That's it, he continued. You heard Hastings? And you? Hang on. And you, Everett? Oh, by the way, this is Mr. Everett, rather a fine member of the theatrical profession. I phoned to him this afternoon. His makeup is good, isn't it? Quite like the dead man, and with a pocket torch and the necessary phosphorescence, he made the proper impression. I shouldn't touch her right hand if I were you, Hastings. Red paint marks so. When the lights went out, I clasped her hand, you see. By the way, we mustn't miss our train. Inspector Japp is outside the window. A bad night, but he has been able to while away the time by tapping on the window every now and then. You see, continued Poirot as we walked briskly through the wind and rain, there was a little discrepancy. The doctor seemed to think the deceased was a Christian Scientist, and who could have given him that impression but Mrs. Maltravers. But to us she represented him as being in a great state of apprehension about his own health. Again, why was she so taken aback by the reappearance of young Black? And lastly, although I know that conversation decrees that a woman must make a decent pretense of mourning for her husband, I do not care for such heavily ruffed eyelids. You did not observe them, Hastings? No? Oh, rouged. Heavily rouged eyelids. You did not observe them, Hastings? No? As I always tell you, you see nothing. Well, there it was. There were the two possibilities. Did Black's story suggest an ingenious method of committing suicide to Mr. Maltravers, or did his other listener, the wife, see an equally ingenious method of committing murder? I inclined to the latter view. To shoot himself in the way indicated, he would probably have had to pull the trigger with his toe, or at least so I imagine. Now, if Maltravers had been found with one boot off, we should almost certainly have heard of it from someone. An odd detail like that would have been remembered. No, as I say, I inclined to the view that it was the case of murder, not suicide, but I realized that I had not a shadow of a doubt in support of my theory. Hence the elaborate little comedy you saw played tonight. Even now I don't quite see all the details of the crime, I said. Let us start from the beginning. Here is a shrewd and scheming woman who, knowing of her husband's financial debacle, and tired of the elderly mate she has only married for his money, induces him to insure his life for a large sum, and then seeks for the means to accomplish her purpose. An accident gives her that, the young soldier's strange story. The next afternoon, when Monsieur le Capitaine, as she thinks, is on the high seas, she and her husband are strolling round the grounds. What a curious story that was last night, she observed. Would a man shoot himself in such a way? Do show me if it is possible. The poor fool, he shows her. He places the end of his rifle in his mouth. She stoops down and puts her finger on the trigger, laughing up at him. And now, sir, she says saucily, supposing I pull the trigger. And then, Hastings, she pulls it. Just taking a tiny break to refresh the voice. So, John, have you been enjoying all of the cooler weather and the wonderful rain that we've finally gotten? I have just been soaking it up personally. It's beautiful. I do love California, but it gets so dry. Well, especially in where I live. That was about, I think that's the longest time in my memory we've gone without rain. So it was a super big relief when we finally started getting it. How are things going in your neck of the woods as far as the COVID cases are going? Ours has just, like, exploded. It's crazy. Yeah, it is. Yeah, it was insane. Like, for the first 4 or 5 months of after the initial quarantine in March, we just had 40 cases, and then in the last let's see, it's been about 12 days. We have gone up. Let's see. 250 some odd, or no, it's about 280 cases. It's amazing. Yeah. Ooh, okay. Well, I'm knocking on wood for you, John. I hope that you're not. But if you are, of course, stay safe, and I hope you have a good quarantine. Uh, did I hear that it takes about 2 weeks to hear the result, or am I getting that wrong? Yeah. Yeah, I'm essential too. Like, our town does deem bookstores as essential, which, thank goodness. Oh, okay, 24 hours. That's not bad at all. Yeah, same. That's good. Yeah, you seem like, I don't think that when we've chatted, I've ever remembered you being sick. At least not that I can recollect. But it's good that you're pretty healthy for the most part. I am too. Yeah, even the places that aren't essential in our town are still staying open because they're trying to keep the businesses as, like, they don't want any of the local businesses to close. Thank goodness, but, we just have to have we just have to follow all of uh, the guidelines. It's going to be really interesting seeing how holiday shopping is going to be with, only allowing a quarter capacity in the store. Because, this will be my 19th holiday retail. It'll be my 17th at that particular store. And it gets so super busy. It's amazing. And, I really appreciate that my town is trying to keep all of the local businesses open because, we understand our neighbors keep us going. We like to support our neighbors. If it hadn't been for, the amazing community when the quarantine started in March, like, who knows how well our store would have been doing, but we're doing really, really well because everybody's like, oh, we have to make sure that our neighbors stay in business. We want to support them. And yeah, we've got a really awesome community. I love them. So yeah, I'm going to go ahead and continue with the next story. Let's see. So we're probably going to be like maybe another half an hour, 45 minutes or something like that. Seems like 3 stories is a good amount. Alright. Story number 3. The Adventure of the Cheap Flat. So far, in the cases which I have recorded, Poirot's investigations have started from the central fact, whether murder or robbery, and have proceeded from thence by a process of logical deductions in the final to the final triumph unraveling. In the events I am now about to chronicle, a remarkable chain of circumstances led from the apparently trivial incidents which first attracted Poirot's attention to the sinister happenings, which completed a most unusual case. I had been spending the evening with an old friend of mine, Gerald Parker. There had been perhaps about half a dozen people there besides my host and myself, and the talk fell, as it was bound to do so sooner or later, wherever Parker found himself, on the subject of house hunting in London. Houses and flats were Parker's special hobby. Since the end of the war, he had occupied at least half a dozen different flats and maisonettes. Maisonettes, yeah. So like little houses, because a maison is a house. No sooner was he settled anywhere than he would light unexpectedly upon a new find and would forthwith depart bag and baggage. His moves were nearly always accompanied by a slight pecuniary gain, for he had a shrewd business head, but it was sheer love of the sport that actuated him, and not a desire to make money at all. We listened for Parker for some time with the respect of the novice for the expert. Then it was our turn, and the perfect babble of tongues was babble of tongues, sorry, and a perfect babble of tongues was let loose. Finally, the floor was left to Mrs. Robinson, a charming little bride who was there with her husband. I had never met them before, as Robinson was only a recent acquaintance of Parker's. "Talking of flats," she said, "have you heard of our piece of luck, Mr. Parker? We've got a flat at last in Montague Mansions." "Well," said Parker, "I've always said there was plenty of flats, at a price." "Yes, but this isn't at a price. It's dirt cheap. £80 a year." But Montague Mansions is just off Knightsbridge, isn't it?" "Big, handsome building." "Or are you talking of a poor relation of the same name stuck in the slums somewhere?" "No, it's the Knightsbridge one. That's what makes it so wonderful." "Wonderful is the word. It's a blinking miracle. There must be a catch somewhere. Premium, I suppose?" "No premium." "Oh, hold my head, somebody," groaned Parker. "But we've got to buy the furniture," continued Mrs. Robinson. "Ah," Parker bristled up, "I knew there was a catch. For £50, and it's beautifully furnished." "I give up," said Parker. "The present occupants must be lunatics with a taste for philanthropy." Mrs. Robinson was looking a little troubled. A little pucker appeared between her dainty brows. "It is queer, isn't it? You don't think that the place is haunted?" "Never heard of a haunted flat," declared Parker decisively. "No." Mrs. Robinson appeared far from convinced. "But there were several things about it all that struck me as, well, queer." "For instance?" I suggested. "Ah," said Parker, "our criminal expert's attention is aroused. Unburden yourself to him, Mrs. Robinson. Hastings is a great unraveler of mysteries." I laughed, embarrassed, but not wholly displeased with the role thrust upon me. "Oh, not really queer, Captain Hastings, but when we went to the agents, Stosser and Paul, we hadn't tried them before because they only have the expensive Mayfair flats, but we thought at any rate it would do no harm. Everything they offered us was $400 or $500 a year, or else huge premiums, and then just as we were going they mentioned that they had a flat at 80, but that they doubted it would be of any good out there, it would be any good our going there, because it had been on their books some time, and they had sent so many people to see it that it was almost sure to be taken. Snapped up, as the clerk put it, only people was so tiresome in not letting them know, and then they went on sending, and people get annoyed at being sent to a place that had, perhaps, been let some time." Mrs. Robinson paused for some much-needed breath, and then continued. We thanked him and said that we quite understood it would probably be no good, but that we should like an order all the same, just in case. And we went up there straight away in a taxi, for after all, you never know. Number 4 was on the second floor, and just as we were waiting for the lift, Elsie Ferguson, she's a friend of mine, Captain Hastings, and they are looking for flat 2, came hurrying down the stairs. "Ahead of you for once, my dear," she said, "but it's no good. It's already let." They seemed to finish it, but, well, as John said, the place was very cheap. We could afford to give more, and perhaps if we offered a premium. A horrid thing to do, of course, and I feel quite ashamed of telling you, but you know what flat hunting is. I assured her that I was well aware that in the struggle for house room, the baser side of human nature frequently triumphs over the higher, and that the well-known rule of dog eat dog always applies. So we went up, and would you believe it, the flat wasn't let at all. We were shown over it by the maid, and then we saw the mistress, and the thing was settled then and there. Immediate possession and £50 for the furniture. We signed the agreement next day, and we are able to move in tomorrow. Mrs. Robinson paused triumphantly. "And what about Mrs. Ferguson? Asked Parker. "Let's have your deductions, Hastings." "Obvious, my dear Watson," I quoted lightly. "She went to the wrong flat." "Oh, Captain Hastings, how clever of you!" cried Mrs. Robinson admiringly. I rather wished Poirot had been there. Sometimes I have the feeling that he had rather underestimated my capabilities. Part 2. The whole thing was rather amusing, and I propounded the thing as a mock problem to Poirot on the following morning. He seemed interested and questioned me rather narrowly as to the rents of flats in various localities. "A curious story," he said thoughtfully. "Excuse me, Hastings, I must take a short stroll." When he returned about an hour later, his eyes were gleaming with a peculiar excitement. He laid his stick on the table and, brushing the nap of his hat with his usual tender care before he spoke. "It is all well, mon ami, that we have no affairs of moment on hand. We can devote ourselves wholly to the present investigation." "What investigations are you talking about?" "The remarkable cheapness of your friend Mrs. Robinson's new flat." "Poirot, you're not serious." "I am most serious. Figure to yourself, my friend, that the real rent of those flats is £350. I've just ascertained that from the landlord's agents. And yet, this particular flat is being sublet at £80? Why?" "There must be something wrong with it. Perhaps it is haunted, as Mrs. Robinson suggested." Poirot shook his head in a dissatisfied manner. Then again, how curious it is that her friend tells her the flat is let, and, when she goes up, behold, it is not so at all. "But surely you agree with me that the other woman must have gone to the wrong flat. That is the only possible solution." "You may or may not be right on that point, Hastings. The fact still remains that numerous other applicants were sent to it, and yet, in spite of its remarkable cheapness, it was still in the market when Mrs. Robinson arrived. That shows that there must be something wrong with it. Mrs. Robinson did not seem to notice anything amiss. Very curious, is it not? Did she impress you as being a truthful woman, Hastings?" "She was a delightful creature." Evidemment, since she renders you incapable of replying to my question. Describe her to me." "Well, she's tall and fair. Her hair is really a beautiful shade of auburn." "Always you have a penchant for auburn hair," murmured Poirot. "But continue." "Blue eyes and a very nice complexion, and, well, that's all, I think," I concluded lamely. "And her husband?" "Oh, he's quite a nice fellow, nothing startling." "Dark or fair?" I don't know, betwixt and between, and just an ordinary sort of face. Poirot nodded. Yes, there are hundreds of these average men, and always you bring more sympathy and appreciation to your descriptions of women. Do you know anything about these people? Does Parker know them well? They're just recent acquaintances, I believe, but surely, Poirot, you don't think that for an instant. Poirot raised his hand. Tout doucement, mon ami. Have I said that I think anything? All I say is, it is a curious story, and there is nothing to throw light upon it, except perhaps the lady's name, eh, Hastings? Her name is Stella, I said stiffly. But I don't see, Poirot interrupted me with a tremendous chuckle. Something seemed to be amusing him vastly. Stella means a star, does it not? Famous! What on earth? The stars give light. Voila! Calm yourself, Hastings. Do not put on that air of injured dignity. Come, we will go to Montague Mansions and make a few inquiries. I accompanied him, nothing loath. The mansions were a handsome block of buildings in excellent repair. A uniformed porter was sunning himself on the threshold, and it was to him that Poirot addressed himself. Pardon, but would you tell me if Mr. and Mrs. Robinson reside here? The porter was a man of few words and apparently of a sour or suspicious disposition. He hardly looked up at us and grunted out, "Number 4, second floor." "I thank you. Can you tell me how long they have been here?" 6 months. I started forward in amazement, conscious as I did so of Poirot's malicious grin. "Impossible!" I cried. "You must be making a mistake. 6 months." "Are you sure? The lady I mean is tall and fair, with reddish gold hair, and—" "That, sir," said the porter. "Come in the Michaelmas quarter, they did, just 6 months ago." He appeared to lose interest in us and retreated slowly up the hall. I followed Poirot outside. "Eh bien, Hastings?" my friend demanded slyly. "Are you so sure now that delightful woman always speaks the truth?" I did not reply. Poirot had steered his way into Brompton Road before I asked him what he was going to do and where he was going. "To the house agents, Hastings. I have a great desire to have a flat in Montague Mansions. If I am not mistaken, several interesting things will take place here before long." We were fortunate in our quest. Number 8 on the 4th floor was to be let furnished at 10 guineas a week. Poirot promptly took it for a month. Outside in the street again, he silenced my protests. "But I make money nowadays. Why should I not indulge a whim? By the way, Hastings, have you a revolver?" "Yes, somewhere," I answered, slightly thrilled. "Do you think that you will need it?" "It is quite possible." "The idea pleases you, I see. Always the spectacular and romantic appeals to you." The following day saw us installed in our temporary home. The flat was pleasantly furnished. It occupied the same position in the building as that of the Robinsons, but was 2 floors higher. The day after our installation was a Sunday. In the afternoon, Poirot left the door ajar, and he summoned me. The day after our installation was a Sunday. In the afternoon, Poirot left the front door ajar and summoned me hastily, as a bang reverberated from somewhere below. "Go over the banisters. Are those your friends? Do not let them see you." I craned my neck over the staircase. "That's them," I declared in an ungrammatical whisper. "Good. Wait a while." About half an hour later, a young woman emerged in brilliant and varied clothes. With a sigh of satisfaction, Poirot tiptoed back into the flat. "C'est ça. After the master and mistress, the maid. The flat should now be empty." "What are we going to do?" I asked uneasily. Poirot had trotted briskly into the scullery and was hauled at the rope of the coal lift. "We are about to descend after the method of the dustbins," he exclaimed cheerfully. "No one will observe us. The Sunday concert, the Sunday afternoon out, And finally, the Sunday nap after the Sunday dinner of England. Le roast beef. All these would distract attention from the doings of Hercule Poirot. Come, my friend. He stepped into the rough wooden contrivance and I followed him gingerly. Are we going to break into the flat? I asked dubiously. Poirot's answer was not too reassuring. Not precisely today, he answered. Pulling on the rope, he descended slowly till we reached the second floor. Poirot uttered an exclamation of satisfaction as he perceived that the wooden door into the scullery was open. You observe? Never do they bolt these doors in the daytime, and yet anyone could mount or descend as we have done. At night, yes, though not always then, and it is against that we are going to make provision. He had drawn some tools from his pocket as he spoke, and at once set deftly to work, his object being to arrange the bolt so that it could be pulled back on the lift. Oh, thank you so much for the follow over, Manor. I hope you're doing all right. I'm almost to a chapter break, so I'll chat with you a little bit then. Let's see. He had drawn some tools from his pocket as he spoke, and at once set deftly to work, his object being to arrange the bolt so that it could be pulled back from the lift. The operation only occupied about 3 minutes. Then Poirot returned the tools to his pocket, and we reascended once more to our own domain. All right, putting up Maestro so I can chat a little bit. I hope you're doing all right. I hope your day or night or whatever time zone you're in is going well. I am Sunny, and I am a variety streamer, mostly story times, though I do some game streams and all of that stuff. And let me put up a little thing with my socials. Yes, I shall. Thank you very much for the hydrate reminder. Hydration is, yes, Genshin Impact is fun. Though I'm going to have to upgrade my internet speed. I tried doing, why wasn't it? I don't know why it didn't. Oh, hang on. There we go. Yeah. Genshin Impact is a lot of fun to stream, though the last time I tried to stream it, it wasn't really showing, unfortunately, so I think I'm going to need to upgrade my internet speed before I can do that. So tell me a little bit about yourself, Over. Are you a streamer or are you a watcher? Watcher sounds kind of like something from like Doctor Who or, oh yeah, it is something from Buffy. Yeah. I just reached player level, something like that, 20 in Genshin Impact last night. I was doing a little bit of that. Okay, nice. What kind of streams do you like to watch? Oh, nice. What kind of stuff do you YouTube? I've got my YouTube, by the way, right here. Oh, okay. Well, I try to keep everything, oh yes. I mean, everything is always a learning experience, I've found. My YouTube things that I put up are just my streams that I directly import. Nice. What kind of games do you like to play? And by the way, feel free on the Discord to post the link in self-promo to your YouTube. Yes, I do too. I like a nice chill stream. Especially, there's so much stress in the world, like especially this year. Oh, goodness. I think I might have seen that before. I'll have to look into it some more, but I've heard people talking about Roblox. Nice. But yeah, definitely put up a link in the Discord and self-promo in the stream-related section on the top with the link to your YouTube. And I think I'm going to go ahead and continue. And thank you for joining the Discord, by the way. Welcome. So right here, this little guy right here, I have him up when I'm chatting between chapters during story time. So we're going to hide him, and we'll continue this interesting case. I'm curious. Part 3. On Monday, Poirot was out all day, but when he returned in the evening, he flung himself into his chair with a sigh of satisfaction. "Hastings, shall I recount you a little history? A story after your own heart, and which will remind you of your favorite cinema." "Go ahead," I laughed. "I presume that it is a true story, not one of your efforts of fancy." "It is true enough. Inspector Jack of Scotland Yard will vouch for its accuracy, since it was through his kind offices that it came to my ears. Listen, Hastings. A little over 6 months ago, some important naval plans were stolen from an American government department. They showed the position of some of the most important harbor defenses, and would be worth a considerable sum of any foreign government. That of Japan, for example. Suspicion fell upon a young man named Luigi Valdarno, an Italian by birth, who was employed in a minor capacity in the department and who was missing at the same time as the papers. Whether Luigi Valdarno was the thief or not, he was found 2 days later on the east side in New York, shot dead. The papers were not on him. Now, for some time past, Luigi Valdarno had been going about with a Miss Elsa Hart, a young concert singer who had recently appeared and who lived with a brother in an apartment in Washington. Nothing was known of the antecedents of Miss Ella Hart, and she appeared suddenly about the time of Valdarno's death. There are reasons for believing that she was in reality an accomplished international spy who has done much nefarious work under various aliases. The American Secret Service, while doing their best to trace her, also kept an eye upon certain insignificant Japanese gentlemen living in Washington. They felt pretty certain that when Elsa Hart had covered her tracks sufficiently, she would approach the gentleman in question. One of them left suddenly for England a fortnight ago. On the face of it, therefore, it would seem that Elsa Hart is in England." Poirot paused, and then added softly, "The official description of Elsa Hart is height, 5'7", blue eyes, auburn hair, fair complexion, straight nose, no special distinguishing marks." "Mrs. Robinson," I gasped. "Well, there is a chance of it, anyhow," amended Poirot. "Also, I learned that a swarthy man, a foreigner of some kind, was inquiring about the occupants of number 4 only this morning. Therefore, mon ami, I fear that you must forswear your beauty sleep tonight and join me in my all-night vigil in that flat below, armed with that excellent revolver of yours, bien entendu." "Rather," I cried with enthusiasm. "When shall we start?" "The hour of midnight is both solemn and beautiful, suitable, I fancy. Nothing is likely to occur before then." At 12 o'clock precisely, we crept cautiously into the coal lift and lowered ourselves to the second floor. Under Poirot's manipulation, the wooden floor quickly swung inwards, and we climbed into the flat. From the scullery, we passed into the kitchen, where we established ourselves comfortably in 2 chairs with a door into the hall ajar. "Now we have but to wait," said Poirot, contentedly closing his eyes. To me, the waiting appeared endless. I was terrified of going to sleep just when it seemed to me that I had been there about 8 hours, and had, as I found out afterwards, in reality been exactly 1 hour and 20 minutes. A faint scratching sound came to my ears. Poirot's hand touched mine. I rose, and together we moved carefully in the direction of the hall. The noise came from there. Poirot placed his lips to my ears. "Outside the front door they are cutting out the lock. When I give the word, not before, fall upon him from behind and hold him fast. Be careful, he will have a knife." Presently there was a rending sound, and a little circle of light appeared through the door. It was extinguished immediately, and then the door was slowly opened. Poirot and I flattened ourselves against the wall. I heard a man's breathing as he passed us. Then he flashed on his torch, and as he did so, Poirot hissed in my ear, "Allez!" We sprang together. Poirot, with a quick movement, enveloped the intruder's head with a slight woolen scarf, whilst I pinioned his arms. The whole affair was quick and noiseless. I twisted a dagger from his hand, and as Poirot brought down the scarf from his eyes, whilst keeping it wound tightly round his mouth, I jerked up my revolver where he could see it and understand that resistance was useless. He could see it. Sorry. As he ceased to struggle, Poirot put his mouth close to his ears and began to whisper rapidly. After a minute, the man nodded. Then, enjoining silence with a movement of the hand, Poirot led the way out of the flat and down the stairs. Our captive followed, and I brought up the rear with a revolver. When we were out in the streets, Poirot turned to me. "There is a taxi waiting just round the corner. Give me the revolver. We shall not need it now." "But if this fellow tries to escape," Poirot smiled. "He will not." I returned in a minute with a waiting taxi. The scarf had been unwound from the stranger's face, and I gave a start of surprise. "He's not from Japan," I ejaculated in a whisper to Poirot. "Observation was always your strong point, Hastings. Nothing escapes you. No, the man is not from Japan. He is from Italy." We got into the taxi, and Poirot gave the driver an address in St. John's Wood. I was by now completely fogged. I did not like to ask Poirot where we were going in front of our captive, and strove in vain to obtain some light upon the proceedings. We alighted at the door of a small house standing back from the road. A returning wayfarer, slightly drunk, was lurching along the pavement and almost collided with Poirot, who said something sharply to him which I did not catch. All three of us went up the steps of the house. Poirot rang the bell and motioned us to stand a little aside. There was no answer, and he rang again, and then seized the knocker, which he plied for some minutes vigorously. A light appeared suddenly above the fan light, and the door opened cautiously a little ways. "What the devil do you want?" the man's voice demanded harshly. "I want the doctor. My wife is taken ill." "There is no doctor here." The man prepared to shut the door. Poirot thrust his foot in adroitly. He became suddenly a perfect caricature of an infuriated Frenchman. "What you say? There is no doctor. I will have the law of you. You must come. I will stay here and ring and knock all night." "My dear sir." The door was opened again. The man, clad in a dressing gown and slippers, stepped forward to pacify Poirot with an easy glance round. "I will call the police." Poirot prepared to descend the steps. "No, don't do that, for heaven's sake!" The man dashed after him. With a neat push, Poirot sent him staggering down the steps. In another minute, all three of us were inside the door, and it was pushed to and bolted. "Quick, in here!" Poirot led the way into the nearest room, switching on the light as he did so. "And you, behind the curtain." "Si, signor," said the Italian, and slid rapidly behind the full folds of rose-colored velvet which draped the embrasure of the window. Not a minute too soon. Just as he disappeared from view, a woman rushed into the room. She was tall, with reddish hair, and held a scarlet kimono round her slender form. "Where's my husband?" she cried, with a quick, frightened glance. "Who are you?" Poirot stepped forward with a bow. "It is to be hoped your husband will not suffer from a chill. I observed that he had slippers on his feet, and that his dressing gown was a worn one." "Who are you? What are you doing in my house?" "It is true that none of us have the pleasure of your acquaintance, madame. It is especially to be regretted, as one of our numbers has come specially from New York in order to meet you." The curtains parted, and the Italian stepped out. To my horror, I observed that he was brandishing my revolver, which Poirot must doubtless have put through the inadvertence in the cab. The woman gave a piercing scream and turned to fly, but Poirot was standing in front of the closed door. "Let me by!" she shrieked. "He'll murder me!" "Who was it that croaked Luigi Valdarno?" said the Italian hoarsely, brandishing the weapon and sweeping each one of us with it. We dared not move. "My God, Poirot, this is awful! What shall we do?" I cried. "You will oblige me to be refraining from talking so much, Hastings. I can assure you that our friend will not shoot until I give the word." "You sure that, eh?" said the Italian, leering unpleasantly. It was more than I was, but the woman turned to Poirot like a flash. "What is it you want?" Poirot bowed. "Do not think it is necessary to insult Miss Elsa Hart's intelligence by telling her." With a swift movement, the woman snatched up a big black velvet cat, which served as a cover for the telephone. "Are they stitched in the lining of that?" "They're stitched in the lining of that." "Clever," murmured Poirot appreciatively. He stood aside from the door. "Good evening, madame. I will detain your friend from New York whilst you make your getaway." "What a fool!" roared the big Italian, and raised the revolver. He fired point-blank at the woman's retreating figure just as I flung myself upon him. But the weapon nearly clicked harmlessly, and Poirot's voice rose in mild reproof. "Never will you trust your old friend, Hastings. I do not care for my friends to carry loaded pistols about with them, and never would I permit a mere acquaintance to do so. No, no, mon ami." This to the Italian, who was swearing hoarsely. Poirot continued to address him in a tone of mild reproof. "See now what I have done for you. I have saved you from being hanged. And do not think that our beautiful lady will escape. No, no, the house is watched, back and front. Straight into the arms of the police they will go. Is not that a beautiful and consoling thought? Yes, you may leave the room now, but be careful, be very careful. He's gone. And my friend Hastings looks at me with eyes of reproach. But it's all so simple. It was clear from the first that out of several hundred probably applicants for number 4 Montague Mansions, only the Robinsons were considered suitable. Why? What was there that singled out from the rest at practically a glance? Their appearance? Possibly, but it was not so unusual. Their name, then? "There's nothing unusual about the name of Robinson," I cried. "It's quite a common name." Sapristi. But exactly. That was the point. Elsa Hart and her husband, or brother, or whatever he really is, come from New York and take a flat in the name of Mr. and Mrs. Robinson. Suddenly they learn that one of their secret societies, the Mafia or the Camorra, to which doubtless Luigi Valdarno belonged, is on their track. What do? They hit on a scheme of transparent simplicity. Evidently they knew that their pursuers were not personally acquainted with either of them. What then can be simpler? They offer the flat in an absurdly low rental. Of the thousands of young couples in London looking for flats, there cannot fail to be several Robinsons. It is only a matter of waiting. If you will look at the name of Robinson in the telephone directory, you will realize that a fair-haired Mrs. Robinson is pretty sure to come along sooner or later. Then what will happen? The avenger arrives. He knows the name, he knows the address. He strikes. all is over. Vengeance is satisfied, and Mrs. Elsa Hart has escaped by the skin of her teeth once more. By the way, Hastings, you must present me to the real Mrs. Robinson, that delightful and truthful creature. What will they think when they find their flat has been broken into? We must hurry back. Ah, that sounds like Jap and his friends now. A mighty tattoo sounded on the knocker. How do you know this address? I asked as I followed Poirot out into the hall. Oh, of course, you had the first Mrs. Robinson followed when she left the other flat. À la bonne heure, Hastings. You use your grey cells at last. Now, for a little surprise for Jap. Softly unbolting the door, he stuck the cat's head round the edge and ejaculated a piercing meow. The Scotland Yard inspector, who was standing outside with another man, jumped in spite of himself. Oh, it's only Monsieur Poirot, one of his little jokes, he exclaimed as Poirot's head followed that of the cat. Let us in, monsieur. You have your friends safe and sound? Yes, we've got the birds all right, but they hadn't got the goods with them. I see. So you come to search. Well, I am about to depart with Hastings, but I should like to give you a little lecture upon the history and habits of the domestic cat. For the Lord's sake, have you gone completely balmy? The cat, declaimed Poirot, was worshipped by the ancient Egyptians. It is still regarded as a symbol of good luck if a black cat crosses your path. This cat crossed your path tonight, chap. To speak of the interior of any animal or any person is not. I know considered polite in England, but the interior of this cat is perfectly delicate. I refer to the lining. With a sudden grunt, the second man seized the cat from Poirot's hand. Oh, I forgot to introduce you, said Jap. Mr. Poirot, this is Mr. Burt of the United States Secret Service. The American's trained fingers had felt what he was looking for. He held out his hand, and for a moment speech failed him. Then he rose to the occasion. Pleased to meet you, said Mr. Burt. All right. So we've come to the end of our 3 stories. Our next story time will be on Wednesday, same time, same place, 2 to 4 Pacific time, and we're going to be reading the next 3 stories of the Poirot Investigates, which are, let's see, what are the stories that we're going to be reading then? The Mystery of the Hunter's Lodge, A $1 Million Bond Robbery, and The Adventures of the Egyptian Tomb. Ooh, Egyptian Tomb, that sounds fun. Alright, welcome back. I'm actually just about to end the stream. Sorry about that over Manikar. Wondering if I should do a game stream. I'm not really sure. Oh no! Well, don't worry. This is all going to be going up on YouTube tomorrow. Yes, I did post up the link to the YouTube. Yeah, I put all of my story times up on YouTube so that, if you miss any of the story times, you can go back and listen. Okay. I know, I love mummy stories. And then since I am an affiliate, there is the agreement that I have to wait 24 hours to post up on YouTube. So that is what I've been doing. So in 24 hours from now, I will be posting this up so you can go and listen to it. Well, the wonderful thing about this is you don't have to have listened to this to listen to the next one, since they're all short stories. But yeah, let's take a look at what there is to do for a possible game stream. We could do the Room 3 again. There is Terraria. We've got Quest of Dungeons. We could do 1 or 2 games of that. And then there is, what is that game? What is it? Puzzle games. The Eyes of Ara, which I don't think I have played for you guys, and House of Da Vinci, although I'm at a standstill with that. Do any of you have any requests or suggestions for games for coming back for game stream? Okay. Well, I'll figure something out. I could also do, actually, I think I'm going to do some puzzles. Oh, Terraria. Okay. Hi, Multi. Good to see you. I'm going to come back and do some Terraria. So I'm just going to end. Hi. I'm just going to end this stream right here just so that I have a solid ending for the Storytime stream. I'm going to take a small break. I'll let you know when I'm back for some Terraria. And I hope you stick around. If not, I'll see you next time. And see you in a moment. Bye.